The following program is a Creative Magic Network production.
You're listening to the Frederic Bai Show, where sky is the limit and space is the place. Here's your host, Frederic Bai.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome. Come on in, sit down, relax, put your earbuds on. This is the Frederic Bai Show, and this radio podcast is about unleashing your creativity. We talk to experts. We step into the unknown. It is an inspirational, magical, intuitive radio podcast as we chat with charismatic enigmas. That's right, artists, people from around the globe. Musicians, singers, radio hosts, business people, photographers, everything in between. I am Frederic Bai, the man of the hour, the man with the power. I'm too sweet to be sour. I'm funky like a monkey. I sting like a bee, produce sweet honey, and I am pretty. I am your favorite French Canucker. And today, guys, I'm not in my home office today, so if there's a little bit of echo, I apologize. I'm in someone else's office, and I didn't expect that kind of echo, to be honest. And today we have a fascinating guest, and I know I say this at every single show that we have a fascinating guest, but hey, it is true. Her name is Cate Montana, and she wrote the book, The E Word. Now, I'll let you figure out what E Word is. So the title of the book is The E Word, Ego, Enlightenment, and Other Essentials. That's right. We're going to talk about the ego to the EGO. It's controversial. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it evil? Or is it part of us? Who knows? But we're going to figure this out today. And you can find Cate at catemontana.com. That's CateMontana.com. How are you today, Cate?
I'm doing great, Frederic. Good to be on the show.
Awesome. We're glad to have you here. And I just want to say this right up front. Your style of writing, it's so uplifting and funny and it's not a monotone book at all. It's not like you know how to write. I mean, you have a lot of experience, and if I'm not mistaken, you were in psychology before, right? And you were a screenwriter.
That's correct. Yeah. And when I kind of hit the wall at age 30, like so many of us do who, do life to the regular formula that you're supposed to do life, like get a good education, get a good job, find a mate in your socioeconomic bracket and all that blah, blah. And, I did that. I followed society's happiness formula for the first 30 years, and I freaking wasn't happy. And I was like, wow, what do I do with that? So that put me on a spiritual journey for the next 30 years. And, I'll have to cut to the chase. The E word is kind of the capstone result of that 30-year, introspection journey.
Yeah. Your book is fascinating. It's a nice yellow book that I really, I just like the tone of it. It's not the usual personal growth book where, some books are very good. Information is great, but they're not the most entertaining books. But your book is really entertaining, and I like your style. All right. So like we said, now you had it all, right? Like you just said, you just, and then you didn't have it all, and then everything crumbled. And usually when these things happen, that's when most people finally wake up. Holy cow. Wake up. Finally.
Yeah.
Oh. And 30 years old is a young age to wake up, isn't it? Compared to many people.
Frederic, I didn't wake up at all at age 30. All I did was manage to transfer allegiance. I did what a lot of people do when they hit that disenchantment with society's formula and with, normal religion. I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and I got stuck into a convent school in high school. And so, those had the answer. And
you're breaking a lot.
Cell phone here. Sorry, I didn't do that earlier. Yeah. Sorry about that. So no, I didn't wake up at 30. Actually kind of extended my sleep because I actually went fervently into New Age spirituality. I came out of the hopper from normal religion, and man, when I bumped into New Age spirituality and gurus and chakra systems and angels and guides, and it was just like this huge awakening to, I say in the book, I called it like coming out of black and white Kansas into Technicolor Oz. And so I immediately just lost myself in this amazing realm of learning about astral projection and out of body experiences and lucid dreaming. And so I got caught up in more story, thinking that all of those prescriptions and all those things I was supposed to do, eat the right things, go vegetarian, wear crystals, say this mantra, do the mudra and find your mantra. And, like a lot of people, I ended up chasing my tail for a very, very, very long time. So, yeah, I wish I could say I'd woken up at 30, but, I took the next step of asleepness, and it was only at the end of the next, another 20 years moving through the new age prescription that I finally came out the other side.
Yeah. And, in your book, you have one, in the beginning of your book, you write, I drifted off to sleep sitting bolt upright when suddenly I was aware of a bright light in a high ringing tone all around me. The light got brighter until it was light. The ringing got louder. The most awesome ocean of love swept through me. I became aware that the light was actually a being. Talk to us a little bit about that moment and what you mean by it was a being.
Oh, that's so cool, Frederic, that you latched onto that, because nobody's asked me this question before. That started off early on in my spiritual quest. So what I said was, I ended up chasing a lot of different ideas and books and systems. But what I also did was simultaneously, I never took any meditation training. I just figured I needed to ask the single question, who am I? So I would sit up late at night every night and do what I called meditate, which was close my eyes, throw my gaze inward, and basically look within, asking the question, who am I? And, and I succeeded at falling asleep bolt upright, night after night after month. And then one day, and this was the experience that got me on track and said, aha, something really is afoot. There really is something more to me, which was this experience of this light showing up in my meditation. And, it was vaster beyond, quite frankly, I thought it was God. It was so vast. The light was so far beyond light as we know it. And the love was so far beyond what we can consider love. And following in the footsteps of my typical human programming, I woke myself up and out of meditation actually in that moment, trying to get on my knees, to bow down to this being. And what was so interesting, though, was when I asked the being, who are you? I sensed this laughter. And Frederic, it was this laughter that was infinite in breadth. And it was so freaking familiar to me. And I was like, wow, I know this being. Well, and the answer I got was, on top of the laughter is, well, you will know someday. And so then fast forward another 10 years and I finally, I went to a new age channel. And for a long time, I thought that, and then I know. Then I went to a Christian mystic for a while and I was like, oh, it wasn't God. It was Jesus. It was Jesus who showed up. Okay. And then I went to a new age channel and then I was like, oh my God, it's Ramtha that showed up to meet me, on my path.
I see.
And that's what we always do. We project whatever story we find ourselves in onto these experiences. And what I finally come to realize, Frederic, was it was me. I met myself, my real self. And that's why the laughter and the voice and the tone and the presence of that being was so bloody familiar. It was me. And it was the me that is so vast and so amazing that, we project all of these different words onto it. God, Jesus, some channeled being, our guide, whatever. But it's never us. But it's always us.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, and there's two things here I like to talk about. So
sure.
Later on, you talk about the dualistic state of the human ego was a lie of perception that truly created a dream world, and I think that's what you're saying, but not in the way the majority of spiritual people and texts would have it. Yeah, and I think that's an important part because I think it can be confusing when you say, oh, well, it was me, but it wasn't me, or it wasn't me. It was God or the higher self, but at the same time, it was me. That's a dualistic state, right? That you're talking about? Or
At that moment, Frederic, it was a dualistic state because I was not one with that being. I was Cate Montana on her knees in bed in the middle of the night, experiencing something that I perceived that was not me. Okay. So it was a highly dualistic state. And that is the state we live in as egos on this planet. The way the ego is created is when consciousness, I am, source intelligence, God, whatever you want to call it, animates a body and we start having experiences through these animated bodies. And the result is the creation of a personal sense of self. We call that the ego. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's an inevitable result of living in a body. We end up with this thoughts that are about the story based on all the experiences that we have in these physical vehicles. And that story, my birth, my education, my first toy bear, my first orgasm, my first husband, my dreams, my hopes, my fears, my despairs, my failures, my wins, all of those become the story of Cate. And that's normal. And that allows me to have experiences with this world. It allows me to have a conversation with Frederic Pye. If I was totally in this oneness state of consciousness where nothing is differentiated and it all is one, there would be no conversation with Frederic and there would be no listeners in the audience and we wouldn't be having this experience.
Right.
So duality is the natural state of the ego consciousness. It's a separate creation.
Right.
That we can say that is overlaid. Language is so difficult in this because we speak from a language of physicality based in duality. Everything is higher and lower and better and worse and good and bad and right and wrong. And it's like we cannot frame anything other than in physical language. We can't even talk about quantum physics without saying, well, quantum particles like electrons. And then we think, wow, a particle, that's a little bit of piece of matter, isn't it? It's this little concrete brick that's this tiny little thing at the basis of reality as we know it. But that's our need to language everything from a physical perspective. How else can we talk? Because we believe we're physical, and particles aren't physical at all. They're pure energy and information. But we don't have the language for that because we don't have the language for the higher self either, except for by separating it and calling it a higher self, because we're not dancing that tune. We're dancing the ego tune.
Right. All right. Once again, we're talking with Cate Montana. She's the author of The E Word, Ego, Enlightenment, and Other Essentials. And you can find her at catemontana.com. Okay, I gotta ask you this question because I am a fan of, your career as a journalist just flourished. And then you were hired by filmmakers of the indie hit What the Bleep Do We Know? And I watched a documentary years ago I watched 3 or 4 times. I even interviewed William Arntz on this show, and amazing guy. Talk to us a little bit about that experience and what it brought to you. How did it enhance you personally? How did it make you a better person to do that, to do that documentary?
I had wanted, as a writer, as a journalist, I was stuck doing mainstream articles in mainstream, newspapers. As a spiritual person, I wanted to write about spiritual topics, and I wanted to have a mainstream audience. And so I actually focused on that. And getting a job with What the Bleep Do We Know was actually a huge manifestation in my life. And it really changed everything because, quite frankly, before I joined the Bleep crew, I was a solitary spiritual person. I sat on my meditation mat for hours a day looking inwards, which is a very solitary journey. And so I was very isolated from others, really, in a lot of ways. I was a journalist, yes, but I wrote from home. I was a freelancer. I designed my entire life around my spiritual pursuit of asking this question, who am I? and probing inside for the answers. So I was very isolated, and getting hired by What the Bleep was like, oh my God, all of a sudden I was out in the mainstream. I was talking to and emailing and connecting with hundreds of people on a daily basis who were just galvanized by this message that, oh my God, we have scientific proof of what Jesus said, my Father and I are one. You know, quantum physics is marching in the door and going, yes, we are all one. Chief Seattle was correct, or actually Chief South was his name, but you know, what we do to the earth, we do to ourselves. And I was privy to this amazing, overwhelming tide of people waking up around the world. And I realized that, wow, I'm not alone on my meditation pillow, which is really funny because, you know, here's the spiritual seeker thing is that I am going to realize God and unity. And so, you know, I was seeking unity, but I was seeking it from such an isolated place. And then all of a sudden, when working for What the Bleep, I was thrown into this bath of thousands and thousands of other people on a similar journey. And that was when I woke up and went, wow, there's a huge tidal wave consciousness shift occurring on this planet that I had been totally unaware of up until that time. And boy, was that heartening, because I have to say, if 14 years ago was the same as today, and I was looking at the Trump administration and all of that, not knowing that there was an enormous hundreds of millions of people around the planet that are shifting gears into a more loving, interconnected, advanced consciousness space, it would be pretty tough to face the world right now.
True. That's very true. You know, you talk about how you were isolated in this at the beginning. Wasn't it like necessary? Isn't it necessary to go through this phase when you kind of get this true awakening? Like, because you don't know. I imagine your entourage wasn't spiritual, or they didn't have that. You know, for many people, when they get a spiritual enlightenment type thing, you know, they don't know many people who think like, who just discovered what they just discovered. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The language is very, very, very hard. Okay, so let's cut to the chase here. So I spent 20 years seeking enlightenment because I was told that enlightenment was what I was looking for, that enlightenment was a state that I, Cate Montana, could actually attain. Yeah. So that I could become enlightened. And that was going to solve all my problems. Being enlightened was going to be blissful, and it was going to give me the answers to everything. It was going to heal my pain. It was going to take me away from my sense of isolation. You know, enlightenment was it. So I pursued it fiercely. As I say, I centered my whole life around it. And I spent days. I mean, I would spend days in meditation looking within and at a stretch. And so to answer your initial question, do I think that a solitary pursuit is necessary? Absolutely, to a certain degree. Not necessarily the degree I did it. You know, that was my journey. That was what it took for me to have a breakthrough or a breakdown, which is actually more like it, or a breakout. So, you know, it's different for everybody, but in the book, I really, really, really stress the importance, especially in our society nowadays where everything is so hectic and media is so frantic and we're so electronically wired, that now more than ever, it is absolutely critical to set at least an hour a day aside for your personal investigation, your personal spiritual pursuits, to calm down, tune out, tune in, drop out, whatever, and take that time for yourself, because there's no other way we're going to unhook from the cacophony and make any sense of what the hell's going on.
Right. Now, okay, you have the spiritual awakening. And okay, you're able to identify the ego, basically. And you write the personal identity, and you, in parentheses, the ego is like a cloud. You can't kill it. But here's the important news flash. You don't need to. What do you mean by that? And, you know, is ego good or bad? Is it evil or, you know?
The ego is just our sense of self, Frederic, and it's our story. of who we think we are. Like, my story is, my name is Cate Montana. I'm a Caucasian woman. I am a writer. I am an author. I am a Leo. I am divorced, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my story. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's when we don't know that there's something more going on than our separate story. That's when we get tripped up. The ego has gotten a really bad reputation in a lot of spiritual circles nowadays. The whole, trend and stress of, for example, Advaita is, the dissolution of the ego. And what a joke that is, because what I discovered is that it's impossible to dissolve the ego while you're being the ego. All, that insistence, that desire in me to become enlightened, it was like that made my ego even more fierce and intact. I, Cate Montana, was going to become enlightened. I, Cate Montana, was seeking attainment. And so what I discovered was, after I pretty much estimate somewhere around 20,000 hours of very intense meditation, I came downstairs one morning to start my morning routine at 4 a.m. and I looked at my meditation pillow and I said, well, actually I said something other than what I'm going to say. I said, screw it, but that's not what I said. And I just looked at my meditation pillow and I just flopped down on it and closed my eyes and said, screw it. And in that moment of letting go all of my seeking, all of my striving, all of the mudras and the mantras and the chants and any breathing technique I'd ever been taught, and it all, I just gave it all up in that moment. And that was when I disappeared. And there was just what we call unity consciousness, non-dual reality. And I was no longer Cate Montana. There was simply presence, awareness, consciousness, spaciousness. But there was no sense of, I'm having an enlightenment experience. Have you ever heard anybody say, I had an enlightenment experience?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I've met quite a few people.
Okay. I'm sorry, but not in those terms. Not like, I don't know. Not like, because I can say that I had. It's not like you go, I had enlightenment experience. Like, you kind of keep
the joke. Here's the joke, Frederic, is that if I cannot have an enlightenment experience, because enlightenment is the absence of the personal self. There's no I around to have an experience. So by even saying I had an enlightenment experience is total BS, because I have to rein myself in every once in a while.
No, it's all right. I like it.
Because it's just, there's two states. There's a dream state called the ego, and waking, walking, talking, chewing gum, being on a podcast with Frederic Bai. There's that reality. And then there's this awesome sea of simple consciousness, awareness, aliveness, life force, consciousness. And it's like, and there's no overlapping territory. There's no way that I can enter into that state of consciousness, because that state of consciousness, there is no I. So I was left with this after 20 years and 20,000 hours of rabid meditation, seeking enlightenment. What a freaking cosmic joke. To finally realize that, I can never be enlightened. Damn it. And, and in that moment, of course, I was Cate Montana back off her meditation pillow looking at that going, oh my God, I can't be enlightened because enlightenment is the absence of me. It's nothing I can ever have or attain or pin on my wall or walk around and brag about. Damn it. Right. And that pissed my ego off big time. And at the same time, I laughed my ass off, because what a joke. To search for this state of enlightenment only to discover that I could never have it because it was the absence of me. What a joke.
Right.
So anyway, so after that, and then every day after that, I mean, of course I spent the obligatory at least a year trying to recapitulate that experience by striving to recapitulate that experience. And so that didn't work, so finally, again, I just finally gave up even trying to attain that. You see, you can't attain that. So I finally just, again, let it go and learned how to just sit and be. And that was the whole freaking trick. How simple is that? Just sit and be. And so years went by with that occurring as a daily basis. And then, of course, I'd open my eyes, get up off my meditation pillow, and a nanosecond later, it was the Cate Montana show all over again. With all my hopes and dreams and fears and angst about money and, oh my God, am I going to get the next job and yada, yada. And I was like, how the hell do I reconcile this blissful place of peace, nirvana, and expansion and obvious oneness with my driven, manic, scared, frightened, isolated, separate ego? Right. And it took me, that was another 10-year journey, well, almost a 10-year journey before I started writing the E word and started to make some sense of it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Once again, we're talking with Cate Montana. She's the author of the E word, Ego, Enlightenment, and Other Essentials. And you can find her at catemontana.com. And guys, right before continuing this conversation, if you have a passion, something that fuels your curiosity, well, on top of getting fascinating interviews such as this one straight to your inbox when you subscribe to our free Creative Magic community, you will get super cool exclusive gifts in return, such as the ebook Happiness Quotes by the Ambassador of Happiness herself, Maura Sweeney, one of our hosts. And this small book is an anthology of 25 inspirational quotes about living a happy life from the inside out. It is cataloged by Maura Sweeney herself and further enhanced by her reflections. She offers information, anecdotal stories, and more to help underscore each contributor's quote. And she also provides suggestions to help you incorporate these maxims into part of your mental landscape. You can subscribe for free at fredericby.com. That's Frederic with a C, by like bye-bye.com. All right. The ego matrix. I like that.
Yeah.
You're right. The world is dealing with the deadly ego matrix, and it's time for us to swallow the red pill and catch on before it's too late. And spiritual/religious people, almost all spiritual and religious people have two red pills to get down because they're dealing with a double whammy, a regular ego matrix plus a spiritual/religious ego matrix. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but clarify it us. The ego matrix versus the spiritual/religious matrix, ego matrix. Are they really different?
Well, no, it's all ego and it's all story. Yeah. I suppose I should just touch on how the ego is created. The ego starts when we come into the physical body. All right, these beautiful little unphysical spirits. And the ego is formed from two unconscious impressions. My physicality. 11 million bits of sensory data hit our brain every second, Frederic, informing us that we are physical beings, okay? And we can't even imagine how enormous this one simple unconscious message is. I am physical, I am physical, I am physical. The other unconscious message that comes as part of that is I am separate. The moment I get popped out of the vagina as a baby, I am barraged with sensory data and I am barraged with the unconscious message that I am separate from the rest of the world. My banky isn't me. I can tell from skin texture it's not me. Mommy's breast is over there. Mommy and daddy are over there. The bottle, the toy bear, the dog, it's all outside of me. So the second unconscious, overwhelming freaking message we run our lives by is a sense of physicality and I'm separate. Okay. And then we begin to think and then we, tag our name to everything. And then we learn that we're female or male and we're Sikh or we're Muslim or we're Jewish or we're agnostic. We learn our story and we go through life in that story based in two things. I am physical. I am separate. Take off. That's the ego. Nothing wrong with that. So what happens is when we get spiritual, what happened to me when I got spiritual, I blindly walked into a whole nother mindset called spirituality. I dumped the mindset of religion and I just picked up another story. And all of a sudden, but this time I had the right story. This time I had the truth. And if you had interviewed me 10 years ago and you'd asked me anything from chakra systems to life after death and asked me the answers, I could have spit the answers to you. And I could have told you exactly how everything is. So I had another story, a bunch of learned information, and yes, a lot of wonderful experiences, out-of-body experiences and astral projections and levitation and all the stuff that goes with a fierce pursuit of spiritual accomplishment. Yes, I had all those experiences. It just enlarged my personal story. It didn't dissolve my personal story. All it did was add to it. So I had a double weight of my personal sense of self. I had a doubled ego. I had the regular Cate Montana show going on, and then I had the spiritual Cate Montana show going on. And I didn't know it. So the more it's just like the turtle dragging around the shell on their back. There I am trying to meditate and take that shell into enlightenment. You know, when
Right.
what the whole thing is, and you can't dissolve the shell while you're wearing it. So what's a mother to do? You know, it really, and people ask me, it's like, well, okay, if I can't attain, well, then what the hell do I do? And, and to me, thank God, the answer is so simple. It's just like, just relax. Know that your whole life is a story. It's okay. The ego is fine. It's normal. If you didn't have one, you'd be dysfunctional and locked up. And just spend time learning how to be with yourself. Ask yourself, who am I? You know, we talk about the ego, and this is so funny, and it's so obvious, even the languaging, Frederic. We say, well, I've got to get my ego under control. Have you ever heard anybody say that, or you said that? I got to get my ego under control?
Yeah, of course.
Of course. Well, but look at the language itself. It's right there. Who is the I that is going to get my ego under control?
Right.
So that's the kind of diving in we've got to do. And it's a very quiet, solitary internal journey. And it doesn't take a lot of bells and whistles. It doesn't take 16 retreats a year. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't take yet another book to read. It's just about that quiet inner pursuit of who the hell am I anyway?
Yeah. But if you're able to say that, oh, I need to get my ego under control, at least you're aware that your ego is, you're aware of your ego at least.
Yes, absolutely. And at this moment, most of society is not aware of what the ego structure is based in or where it comes from or why it thinks the way it does. We're still stuck with Freud thinking that, and that was a misnomer. You never called the ego. He called it das Ich, the I. So, we're still playing head games with ourselves. We're still playing psychology when we talk about the ego, and we bandy the word about as if we knew what the hell it really meant, but we really don't.
Right.
So yes, we're aware that we're not our ego on one level, and yet we're still, we're shooting in the dark. And which is why I finally wrote this book. I didn't want to talk about any of this, Frederic. I didn't want to talk about enlightenment. I figured there were already enough people out there bandying the word around, and it was like, oh God, I don't want to set myself up as a teacher, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 years ago, I am within me, the presence, God, source, whatever you want to call it, just picked me up by the scruff of the neck and slapped me down in front of my computer and said, damn it, sit down and write what you know about the ego and this structure and what we're doing and how lost so many people in the spiritual world are trying to, oh my God, personal manifestation. What a great example of the ego run amok as a spiritual ego trying to manipulate quantum reality in order to get what it wants.
Right. How can Maslow's hierarchy of needs help us? Or, because you talk about it in your book, in chapter 6, growing up, physical needs, safety needs, belonging needs, esteem needs, self-actualization, and transpersonal. And ultimately the goal is to get to transpersonal, identity beyond the personal self. Is are we there as a society now? Are we there, how can it help us? How can it help us, be aware of that ego?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I've found personally that it helps to know that the ego, it evolves, just like everything in life evolves. And that just like there are people in kindergarten and in graduate school and in 8th grade, that there are different stages of development that we see on this planet right now. And that this story, this sense of self that we have, it starts out, remember from the early, from that moment of coming into the world, the message of I am physical, I am alone, I am isolated, I am separate. That is our very first driver for the ego. And when we're lost in the story of I am physical and I am separate, then we have Donald Trump is the perfect epitome example of an ego that thinks it's it and that there's nothing more, that's lost in that fearful story of separation, which is all about self and other. There is no connecting. There's no sense of I am one with my brother and sister. There is just self and other, which dictates, walls and weapons and war. Isolation is fear-based. And it's not until we start to grow up and have life experiences and have a bit of a humbling here and there, or a hell of a humbling here and there, that we all of a sudden begin to drop that ivory tower, oh, I'm it, unconscious belief, and we get beat up enough and go, oh wow, I'm not all that special. Oh wow, I have the same hopes and fears as people around me. Oh my God, I have had the same success and failures. My story is just my unique story, but it's the human story. And we become more humble, more gracious, and our isolation and the barrier of the personal self, the ego, begins to melt a bit. Bernie Sanders is a great example of a evolved transpersonal ego. He has, so far gone beyond he doesn't see himself as separate and alone. He sees himself as part of the whole. And he sees as a result his responsibility as a human being to reach out and assist others in this story with him to make it better for everyone. So he's transcended that lockdown fear place of still absolutely adamantly believing I'm alone and frightened. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And, we don't want to turn this into a political show, but, I can tell people, but I can tell, I spoke to some people who think that, Donald Trump is all right and he's there for unity. Mm-hmm. He's, yep. So, yeah.
Perception is.
I'm sorry?
But perception is everything. And, and I'm not pointing any fingers at Donald Trump at all. It's just that he's a great example of a more isolated ego. Yeah. Versus, say, someone like a Bernie Sanders. Right. And the whole trick, and I was so excited, Frederic, when, because on that 20, 25 year, 30 year spiritual quest of mine to reconcile the ego play separation with the transcendent egoless state of consciousness, there was no reconciling the two. And yet I was always taught in spiritual camps that it was only when I would become enlightened, which is impossible as we've discussed, that I would be free and liberated. And so I'm like, well, okay, what do I do? Yeah. And I finally stumbled, when I was writing this book, I finally stumbled into there really is a state of consciousness that we can access as egos right here, right now on planet Earth that begins to dissolve the boundaries of the personal self a little bit enough to feel that interconnected spaciousness, to begin to adopt, to live from a point of view that incorporates the quantum view of things, that we really do live in an undifferentiated, unborderless, unbounded sea of information and energy and potential, that we really are absolutely one. And so we can actually start to train ourselves. And that's what my whole book is about, is to get people off the hobby horse of thinking that enlightenment is the answer. Give it up, give it a rest. And there is a way to attain liberation, is by expanding the personal self, not inflating it artificially, but expanding it to be inclusive.
Right.
It's very exciting. All the threat and the fear goes away.
All right, once again, we're talking with Cate Montana. She's the author of the E-Word, Ego, Enlightenment, and Other Essentials. You can find her at catemontana.com. And guys, right before continuing this conversation, are you an Amazon shopper? When you pick up her book, you can pick up her book from our website at fredericbuy.com. And when you do that, Amazon kicks back a few bucks to the show. It helps cover production costs at no additional cost to you. No hidden fees, no nothing. So if you like this show, if you like what you hear, you can help by going over to fredericbuy.com, click on her page, and click the link to her book. It is really that simple. It will take you straight to the Amazon page. All right. In your book, Cate, there's a place you talk about the law of attraction. And, to me, the law of attraction kind of pisses me off a little bit because it's perceived now, taken as something that will, feed our selfish small selves. I want the house, the money, and it's taken on such a superficial way for many people. And you talk about it and you touch on it. And I love how you put it. You're right. The law of attraction is probably the single most popular system to be introduced in the spiritual arena ever. And the reason for this is 3 guesses. The law of attraction is not about transpersonal and transcendent mind. The law of attraction is not about spirituality. The law of attraction is about satisfying the needs and desires of the ego. Thank God you said this. And come from my thoughts. and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. But anyway, go ahead. Talk to us a little bit about that in the law of attraction.
Yeah. Well, it's such a joke because it basically, the law of attraction, the way it's usually taught nowadays, is a very isolating, separating discipline. I, Cate Montana, physical standalone unit human being, am going to manifest that red Tesla that I want. Okay, and it's going to having that Tesla is going to satisfy my ego needs. I'm going to feel very self-assured, and my self-esteem is going to be bolstered, and I'm just going to feel really hot driving that car around. Wow! But the way it's currently taught is, I, Cate Montana, am going to do storyboards and do pictures and chant mantras as I drive a Tesla. And I'm setting myself up to manifest from the personal ego. I, Cate separate, have to draw to me a separate car by influencing the quantum field, which, by the very languaging is now a third thing that's separate in the equation, the formula of manifesting. And I'm like, really? The reason manifestation doesn't bloody work very often, or because it takes so long, is because we're coming at it with the wrong eye. It's not Cate Montana that is going to manifest the Tesla. I, Cate Montana, have one sole responsibility. I set up my intent. I want a freaking Tesla. Great. The rest is up to I am. The lawless quantum is source intelligence creation. All I can do is lay that desire into the quantum field and let it go. Let life, let that big I am, that light, that infinite source that I am, bring it to me. And stop sweating the small stuff. And by God, stop thinking that I'm the one that's doing the manifesting.
Tell us the story, in graduate school. I think the fascinating story that you have that I think people should hear.
Okay, so I'm in graduate school. I'm in my very last class, in my very last final exam. And I was taking a class on the nature of creativity. It was taught by the head of the department. And I went into this exam, no pressure, with a 4.0 average, okay? And I really wanted to keep my 4.0. So he always did open book exams, usually at a potluck at somebody's house, and I I sponsored the test, and it was at my house. And after dinner, he passed a hat with the exam questions, and then we had an hour open book. And then we would all join each other in the living room and, our questions, and then it would be a group conversation. These exams were so cool, they usually lasted the whole night. And by the end of it, you really knew the subject matter. So, okay. So he passes the hat, and I pull out the question, and it's not a question. It says, write an epic poem or a short story about man's evolutionary journey, bringing to bear all of the archetypal themes of the mother, the warrior, the lover, the fool, and, write this amazing tale. Well, I freaked out. And I went, I want a different question. This isn't a question. This is an impossibility. And, and Dr. Ahrens just laughed in my face and said, "You're wasting time, girl." And so I stomped off with my notebook, and I was like furious, Frederic. It was like, shit, I can't do this. Write an epic poem about all of this in an hour. So, so for the first 15 minutes, I, just sat in the grass and just whined and tried to put together ideas. And I just came up with one crappy idea after another, and they all sucked. And so about 20 minutes later, I'm just like, then I fall into depression, and I try a few more ideas, and they're equally horrible. And finally, I'm angry, and then I'm victimized. And finally, after about 40 minutes of just complete frothing at the mouth and emotional blah, blah, I'm finally so wiped out. I'm just like, well, screw it. I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. No way I can do this. There goes my 4-0. Oh, well, here back to saying screw it, but not that language. So anyway, so I lay down on the grass, and I just lay there, and I was just too tired to even moan. And I don't know how long, but all of a sudden, out of this blankness, out of this no-placeness, out of nothing, this story just lands in my mind, and it's complete. It's just like this gestalt. It's this entire amazing tale. Don't ask me what it is. I can't even remember anymore. But I was just like, oh my God. And so I had like 10 minutes to write it down. So I'm writing furiously for the last 10 minutes, and he rings a bell, and I write all the way back to the house, and we sit down, and I'm writing as we're all gathering in the living room. I'm writing, and then, Dr. Aaron asks us, who wants to go first? And I'm just like in a fever, and I raise my hand. Oh my God. Because I had just been given the gift of where true creativity comes from.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't me, Cate Montana, splicing together a decent story in an hour. The story that was given to me, Frederic, I couldn't have come up with that in a million years as Cate Montana. But all I did was I had the need, I had the desire, and I let it go. And it was given to me from the greatest source possible, life itself, the great source intelligence. And it was like, in that moment, it was like, oh my God, that is how manifestation is supposed to work. That is how manifestation works.
Isn't that surrender? Because you have a chapter in your book that talk about that, surrendering.
It's absolutely about surrender. And what are we surrendering? We're surrendering our personal story, Cate Montana's need to, have a great story, to have a best-selling book, to have a whatever, and letting all of that personal stuff go. And just knowing, just relaxing into life itself, the arms of life, and giving it all up. Which is boy, does that sound easy? It's like people say, and people ask me, well, how do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. How do you drop a hot potato? You just freaking drop it.
Right. Oh, yeah.
There was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was a wonderful little skit that the Bob Newhart show did. I don't know. He's a psychologist, and this woman walks into his office, and she says, "I have this terrible, paralyzing fear that I'm going to be locked in a box and buried." And he said, "Well, that's terrible." And she says, "I know." And he says, "Well, stop it." And she said, "What do you mean stop?" And he said, "Just stop it. STOP, another word, IT. Stop it." That's how you drop it. But, easier said than done.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, thank you so much, Cate. Wow, that was amazing. Your real personality reflects your writing. You're exciting, you're uplifting, you're funny. It's amazing. So, where can people find you, and where can they buy your book, and where, how to have access to your services?
Thank you. It's Cate Montana, Cate Montana, just like the state.com. The E word, ego, enlightenment, and other essentials is on Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble. You can order it at your bookstore, wherever. And I'm totally open to questions. You can get a hold of me through my website, and I just love to talk to people on their journey of, making sense of this stuff and getting on with life.
Alrighty, guys. Alrighty. Thank you so much, Cate. Exciting. Fun stuff. Hey, go pick up her book. Seriously. The E word, ego, enlightenment, and other essentials by Cate Montana. That was a really fun interview. I'm telling you, you're going to be entertained by this book. She has really a quirky, fun personality. The same thing that you heard on this conversation, you're going to find in the book. And she really puts it in an entertaining, fun way. Go pick it up now. So I just want to thank her again. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Also, would like to thank those who pledged to our Patreon page. We are grateful for your help. And for those of you wondering what Patreon is, it's a simple way for you to contribute to the network every single month and get super cool exclusive rewards in return. I promise you will love the perks. Our Patreon page is at FredericBye.com. That's Frederic with a C. Buy.com and click Patreon in the header. Money is used to cover our production costs and enhancements. It is also used to cover our editing time and sharing to the different podcast channels. You can contribute for as low as one little tiny dollar. And also, guys, we're looking for the new host on the Creative Magic Network. If you're somebody with a passion, with a message to spread that you may want somebody to lead you by the hand in the podcast world and have access directly to a new audience. Hey, check us out. Click Become a Host at FredericBye.com. It's a very, very cool community that we have, so it's very cool. And check us out. Also, the Creative Magic Store is open, alive, and well. It's designed with meaning, meant to inspire you and tap into your intuition and add a little bit of magic into your life. FredericBye.com and click Creative Magic Store in the header. Hey, this podcast is free every time you download it on iTunes, Stitcher. So you can go over there and subscribe. It is listener supported, and when you subscribe, it really helps us in with the algorithm. So just leave a review too. In Stitcher or wherever you get your podcast. Give a 5-star review. Just give it a 5-star and leave it at that. It really helps brother out. All right, guys, it's time for me to ride off into the sunset, and that's about it. I have my army pants on. And it's freaking freezing outside. There's a snowstorm actually. I'm inside, safe and sound. But outside, this is Canada. It's very cold. So anyway, stay safe, guys, and don't forget, live with purpose, passion, fire, and love. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Frederic Bye Show. For more information, go to FredericBye.com. That's Frederic with a C, bye like bye-bye.com.